Okay, let's get going here. We have last time we dealt with weapons to some extent, and there's some things we did not touch on. And so there are basically two issues left with weapons. What is the value of I know some sensei stress teaching traditional weapons like kobudo, sais, tonfa, bow, hanbo, jo, and there are other traditional weapons. And some sensei deal exclusively with training with modern weapons like knives, guns, rifles, both in a defensive and offensive manner. There's a difference between the two. So I guess the first question is, what is the value of teaching each? What is the value of teaching traditional weapons versus modern weapons, or however way you want to look at this? Any thoughts? Dave, you're smiling too much. You're going to have something to say.
I'm letting somebody else jump in. I'm sorry, what?
I was saying, it looks like Dave has something to say.
Yes.
Am I that transparent? I was waiting for somebody else to take a shot at this one.
Well, nobody wants to take a shot at it. I mean, you know.
Okay, well, in that case, I will jump in. Flight 93. If they knew what to do with their Sky Miles magazine, could have played out a little differently, or a lot differently. Roll them up real tight. You got yourself an excellent Yawara. And you got a bunch of passengers with Yawaras who know how to use them. Even if you don't know how to use it, it's still a viable tool, especially if you've had just a modicum of training.
Well, I mean, okay, that would be a rolled up magazine. Essentially, would be a modern weapon, because you didn't have magazines 200 years ago or 300 years ago.
Well, the rolled up magazine becomes wood, and wood's been around forever, and it becomes a Yawara or a Koshi-Nobo. Or
okay, that's the relationship I'm looking for. Okay,
I'm sorry. I wasn't.
That's okay.
Yes, sir.
That analogy has to come up because Seki's approach was empty hand. Essentially, if you knew how to move, if you knew how the human body moved, and you knew how to, you pick up a pencil, and if you knew how to use it, you could do a lot of the same things with a pencil, hand bow, one of the bamboo things you hit with. I don't know the proper term. Someone want to correct me so that I'm politically correct?
How about a screama or like the sticks?
A screama, right? Most of the movements are pretty common movements, regardless of what you put in your hand. And that's where I like Dave, who showed the transition from a magazine to a Yawara to a wooden stick of whatever length it is. So what is the value? Still comes down to the question: what is the value of teaching traditional weapons versus a Yawara stick versus you've got a magazine. How are you going to defend yourself with it? What's
Yeah, I think Dave was on the right path. I think you've got to draw a parallel to whatever ancient weapon you're using to what's available today. What are you actually going to have with you?
Okay.
Like there's obviously things you can put on your keychains, or like your magazines, or there's things around that you can use, a pull stick or a stick on the ground, whatever, a broomstick. There are things that kind of correspond, and you could use similar techniques with what's available today versus, the traditional weapons. Personally, I don't teach a lot of traditional weapons. I focus more on knives, guns, sticks, things that are probably more likely to be encountered today.
Okay. The so what is there a different intent in teaching traditional weapons versus modern weapons, or is as a sensei, what is your goal for your students in teaching either modern weapons or traditional weapons?
For me, I primarily teach from a self-defense perspective, rather than this. Some traditionalists will hate this, rather than for the pure art of it, and the history. So my purpose is, hey, here's what you're likely to encounter. So, how do we deal with this? Or here's what's likely to be around. Do you know how to use it?
Right. Okay. And I know from seminars I've done back east, I think one of the last ones was I had everyone bring a couple of kitchen tools other than knives. And whatever they brought was what they used to defend themselves with, which got to be kind of humorous at times. But
Sure. I remember that seminar.
it's that's a reality. You can do a lot with a spatula. Even some of this, how do you say, some of the plastic ones that don't have sharp edges. And I mean, my attitude is that if you give the student the concept and the approach, and they know how to use, for example, a UR stick, they can just take that, because 12-inch dowel, you can teach with that, and they can take that and apply that to almost anything they can put in their hand. And once they got the concept, with a little practice, they're set to go.
Yeah, we've done some UR techniques, then I've substituted the UR with a mini flashlight.
Yeah.
All right, let's all go do the same thing.
Right.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly with you on the self-defense aspect, because what you're focusing on is practical. What's most likely, and what kind of defenses can you turn into preserve yourself, self-preservation. And one of the things, like when we work on gun takeaways or even knife takeaways, the understanding is that you're going to practice these, but you're only going to use them in extreme situations. Somebody's got a gun to your back and there's no one else around. You hand them your wallet, you're done. Hopefully, if you are with family in a confined space and somebody's got a gun to your back, you're much more likely to want to execute a takeaway in a situation like that. And the more you practice, the better you get at it, the more confident you get. And one of the other things that we teach is distance. When that gun's 8 feet from you, don't plan on taking it away. And don't plan on being a hero. And
you're not Superman, you're not faster than speed.
Right. When that gun is close to your person, whether it's behind you, beside you, in front of you, at an angle, whether it's being held like this, or like this, it's still takeawayable. I don't think that's a word.
It is now.
Is it now?
And so I find that whenever I teach weapons, guns and knives, I have students who have considered things or know things that are not part of my curriculum, and they generously teach me and the rest of the class what they've learned or what they've observed or what they picked up in previous training, and it gets added to our curriculum.
yeah, I've had the benefit of working with a lot of law enforcement and defensive tactics trainers over out here. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to get their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The thing about law enforcement is that it's so surprising. First of all, they receive so little training.
They do.
It's surprising. The
Right.
other thing is that we've had an FBI agent present in our dojo, and we've had some local law enforcement present in our dojo, and the focus, especially with the FBI, is to get them to stand down and then apprehend them. I'm not interested in apprehending the guy on the street. I'm interested in doing whatever I have to do to dismantle, disable long enough for me to get away. That's two very different objectives. So,
Right, and that's an important distinction to make with your students too. Like, law enforcement's got a different duty than a civilian does. Your duty as a civilian is to be safe. Law enforcement's got a duty to control and protect everybody.
mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And having worked with law enforcement, that is a real difference, because they're surprisingly subject to so many restrictions as to what and when they can do it, and various policies. I kind of put it in the thou shalt not list. Now, I'm not saying some of these policies aren't, legitimate, but as I used to tell my students, if someone breaks into your house, you want to make sure they're facing you when you shoot them, because if you're shooting them in the back, and there have been some cases where the burglar, so to speak, turned his body, although his feet were still facing forward, and initially it was assumed that he was shot in the back, in which he could say, I was leaving the house and they shot me. Now in California, you can get in trouble for that. I don't know about other states, but when they, fortunately the prosecution had some really good attorneys, and they were able to establish by the angle that the bullet went into his body, and that he was actually facing forward when the person who shot him shot at him, and he just turned his body at the same time. But it goes to, if you do get in a armed situation, you really have to be careful what you say and what you do. Go ahead, Raymond.
I was going to jump in here. Hi, I'm Raymond. I'm new to the group, but the discussion kind of led me to think that, I've run across a lot of people that say, well, I don't like to train in that martial art because it's all sport related, or they have rules. What I think they fail to realize is that in self-defense, you also have rules, but you're not going to be held accountable to those rules until you probably have to go to court.
Right.
And that's, excessive force, those kind of things. And like you're discussing there, defending yourself in your home and the angle of a bullet, they can all make a difference. And you're going to be judged on those, which are rules, just like you have in a sport. We train according to those rules, or we try to train with the thought of the proper amount of force. And I think that's one of the beauties of jiu-jitsu too, is that you have options other than deadly force, other than traumatic impact, to somebody. You have other options.
Right, and I've told this story before. I think one of the great things that jiu-jitsu teaches, and some other martial arts do, but it's not that frequent, is control. Control is what is important. My first year as a junior high teacher, I took over some other teacher's homeroom and had a ninth grade of boys, and there was a ringleader who was just out to give me a tough time. And one day as I was walking to class, he came up behind me, put a ballpoint pen around my neck, and grabbed my hand and put it behind me, just to see what I could do. I guess he found out I knew jiu-jitsu, and he got an elbow in the ribs, and a very nice hip throw. We were on concrete, and I realized because it was a tough school. And the policy with that school that if a student touched a teacher in an aggressive manner, the teacher was required to file a police report. And as he was going over, I realized it's my homeroom problem. And so thanks to control, I was able to pull up, and all he did was get a few scrapes on it. But as he hit the concrete, end of the day, the principal wanted to know, why didn't you file a police report? And I said, I want to see how he behaves in class tomorrow. He was a totally changed kid. And so was the rest of the class. But anyway, I guess I had established my rep. You have to use, the one thing that's critical in self-defense that a couple of you mentioned is that, use of force, and you have to control it, and there are limitations as to what you can do. And the thing is that different states have different laws in terms of how far you can go. Okay, let's get back to the weapons here just for a moment, because I happened to watch a video last week for gun defenses, and the first thing the defending person was showing these techniques. The techniques of themselves they were legitimate. But the first thing he did was grab the person's wrist. How do any of you teach, if a person has a handgun, the first thing you do is grab their wrists? Why would you or why wouldn't you?
I want to redirect that barrel.
Pardon?
I want to redirect that barrel first.
Right.
Yeah, you're gonna grab the weapon first. Why? What is it? There's only one reason.
Because I've lived 70 years and I'd like to live 70 more.
Well, the latter's not going to happen, but
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Come on, where's your vote of confidence? Seriously, the gun is still a viable issue. When you grab the wrist, you don't have the control that you want. And Will said it best. I want control of that barrel, because it's what comes out the end of that barrel that matters, and when it comes out.
okay, yeah. And you said the word is control. The difference between a gun and rifle, not a rifle as much, but it's pretty close to a gun, and any other weapon is, with the gun and rifle, you have to control the weapon. Everything else, you have to control the person. And because you can't control this, the trigger finger, you can't get to it usually. That's why you have to control the weapon. I've been with a revolver, I've been hit with a firing pin in my little finger. Hurts like hell, and it's bloody. But the gun didn't fire. I mean, the gun wasn't loaded. How many of you have trained? This is a hard question to ask. I know most of us, and I will, 95% we use rubber guns or rifles or wooden guns that shoot wooden bullets. No, they. How many of you have ever trained with a real weapon, unloaded, and you've made sure that it's unloaded?
We have.
Okay.
It was a BB pistol from Walmart, and the cool thing about training with it, unlike the
Baby?
Glock and the Beretta that we have that were replicas, heavy replicas, and true to size replicas, good training material. But this gun, the cool thing is that rather than saying bang, when you pulled the trigger, you heard the click. You heard the what would have been a shot. So at that point, we could train students, stop, where's the gun when you heard that sound? And that's where the bullet went. So it was just another way to make things more realistic.
Okay. Yeah, there is a difference. Jason, just to let you know, we do not have any video for you. I think we have audio. Okay, yeah, a gun is a real gun. I kind of tell my students, the longer you look at a real gun, the bigger the barrel gets. And that's not something, so you don't want to look. You don't want, I just tell my students, don't look at the gun barrel because it's not going to help you do anything. And guns also have a couple of other issues, real guns. One, they have sharp edges. One, they have moving parts. Two, they have moving parts. And that's the moving parts are what you, particularly with a semi-automatic, are what you have to control. With the automatic, you also have the problem of when the bullet, the shell casing exits. If depending on how you're holding the handgun, you can get second or third degree burns on your palm. Just so you know it. It's you're not going to walk away from an automatic scot-free if the gun fires. If you're strong enough, you can actually jam it by just having the death grip on the weapon, the barrel. Revolver, the trick is to grab the cylinder, grab your hand around the cylinder, and then it won't fire. These are little stupid things I picked up over the years. Yeah, guns are different, and they're not as nice. And when I've had students train with a real gun, which has been pretty rare. It's not unusual for them to get cuts on their hands from the weapon, and that's a learning experience for them. So it's just something, you want to train as realistically as possible. But you don't want anyone coming into your dojo with a live weapon. That's not cool. Anyway, okay. The other thing on weapons. What else do we have here? A few years back, and I don't know where this originates from. When I was with the AHA, some people preferred to call weapons defensive tools. I don't know whether there are political or religious reasons for not calling it a weapon, or making it more politically correct or socially acceptable. So I guess my question is a ballpoint pen, is a ballpoint pen a defensive tool or is it a weapon?
It's a weapon.
Which one is politically correct?
The pen's mightier than the sword, right?
Pardon?
The pen is mightier than the sword.
I'll jump in here if I may.
Go ahead.
So I've spent some time with TSA as a regulator, and I can tell you that specifically on their list of prohibited items are Kubotans, Yaras, things like that, and they will take those away from you at the checkpoint. But I saw plenty of magic markers go through, which in my mind is like, this is a Kubotan, this is a Yara, So kind of back to the original discussion, is that a weapon or is it a magic marker? Well, it depends on your perspective.
You want to go on a plane and you want to take a writing utensil, you're allowed to take a Goliath pencil. Anybody ever seen a Goliath pencil? It's a perfect Uwara. And it also has a very sharp tip.
One of those big.
Yeah,
Yes. And
yeah.
I've taken one on a plane more than once, but my little pocket knife, my little piano pocket knife that has a 1.5 inch half blade, I forgot it. Forgot I had it, and they pulled me aside, frisked me. I had to act like I was enjoying it before they'd stop, and it was amazing. They confiscated it. I said, "Can I get it back?" And you ship it? And no, it's confiscated. And so I was a criminal for taking that, but my Goliath pencil was perfectly fine. Yeah.
What I do, which I'm just, inevitably someday it may happen. I have in my backpack, I've got a couple pens, and then there's it's actually a same length as a pen, but it's just all solid plastic. It's essentially a Kubotan. And it's gone on probably every flight with me for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
And, so it depends. I'm just curious as to when I'm going to get stopped with it. But it's amazing how some things can get past. And I had a student once. He was a black belt, and he had a Kubotan. They took that away from an actual Kubotan. They took that away from him at the airport, and then they said he opened his mouth and said, "Well, I can do things with my belt."
And they took it.
They didn't take his belt. They just said, "You're not going to fly on this plane." They wouldn't let him fly. He could get up on the fly list. And then he went further and said, I can defend myself from anything. How do you say? He was upset when he saw me the next time because he thought he was treated very unfairly. And I said, there's some times when you don't open your mouth.
Sensei, I'll jump in. I think I got enough notes here to be able to add some maybe some value feedback on what I'm hearing from everybody, and your part kind of gives me an opportunity to segue in here. So I'm gonna jump around a little bit, but that's in catch up on some of the other comments that were made. And I'll start with this. Ray, good to have you. Hopefully you continue to join. Welcome to participating. One of the comments that Ray was talking about was, that there's no rules, and in sport there's rules, right? And then in real life, there's rules as well. And for that, I would have to almost disagree a little bit with that. I believe there's rules in sport, but there's moral decisions in real life, right? So there's not necessarily rules. You could do whatever you want. And then there's scenarios, right? And so are those things, the circumstances matter. Is it life and death, or is it, where do you go with it? So, and then at what capacity do you take it to? So that determines on whether or not you're going to advance what you're doing and the reason for doing it. And then there's a moral, obviously you have to be held accountable behind those things, and then that's where the legal part comes in, right? And so, but all of those things in the moment have purpose, have reason, and that should be determined by a moral decision, right? And so
you just have to be able to justify what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so that would be what you would refer to as a rule,
right?
And so, in that circumstance, I would agree. Yeah, that certainly would apply, because in the other way, you're talking about potentially life or death, or you're talking about winning a medal or a trophy. Right. And so that's why there's a difference there. And then weapons, we talk about the obvious, the gun, the knife, the stick, the bottle, whatever it might be. But in all reality, anything that's an extension of your body can be used as a weapon. That's subjective. So, I think there's other segments that can come of the topics that we're talking about. One being, first, when you're talking about weapons and whether you're training using weapons as a self-defense tool or if you're using it as offensively, or whatever it might be, but is the individual that you're working with, that you're training, aware of the consequences, whether you're defending a weapon or are you using it offensively? Are you aware of the consequences? And consequences can go in a million different directions, right? There's legal repercussions that can be behind it. There's physical repercussions. There could be life or death scenario. Those things, you have to be not only physically aware of those circumstances, but mentally aware of them as well. And that takes in a lot of different directions. If we go back to the moral decisions that we're making, whether it's rules or not, right? Then, or we're talking about life and death and what could be the outcome, or you're talking about innocent bystanders that might be around, loved ones, just somebody you don't even know. If you're trying to defend yourself about this, and then all of a sudden you're successful in defending yourself, but the outcome injured someone else, did you successfully accomplish what you were trying to do? I mean, then there's consequences behind that, right? So those things start to branch off into a million different directions. And then in addition to that, another segment can be the reality of defending against weapons or using a weapon, right? And so in a classroom environment, in a training scenario, those things they're accepted, they're engaged, they're people participate in it. But do they truly understand? I mean, Sensei Kirby had mentioned, one of the comments that he made was that the longer I look, the more I look into the barrel of the gun, the larger it gets. Well, that's for a reason, right? Because you're looking at the reality of it. You're looking at the danger behind it. You're feeling the danger, the threat, the significance behind it, right? And so in a real life scenario, those things are amplified. I can't emphasize how much, but because your life is on the line, it's way different than a classroom environment. It's not even close. And so physically, people could do those things in those environments, and then they like to do it, from a training session, or they like to see it in a theatrical setting. But if someone has ever encountered that, and hopefully never, but if they did, and they have, which are likely very few people that have encountered those scenarios, they understand the emphasized, the heightened level of fear, adrenaline, anxiety, emotion, the parallels of danger that are there are unquestionable. Way different than the other environments in a training setting. So can someone actually do those things, right? Are they prepared to do those things? And physically they may be, but if mentally they're failing, they will never be successful at doing those things. And so that's an additional segment that I feel like needs to be worked on in every self-defense scenario, weapons or not. And so, because those things apply every single time. And then when we get to the TSA part, when we're talking about, when they're looking at weapons, their judgment is subjective as well, right? They only pick out the obvious. They pick out the knives, the guns, even the Kubotans or whatever, so they're going through that things. But as Sensei mentioned again, they didn't take a belt from somebody, which I think is a very significant weapon, right? They don't stop you walking in with a cane, which I'll take a cane all day, every day. They're never going to stop you for that. And so, yeah, when you get yourself in trouble by exposing yourself, saying I could do this with that, for the example that Sensei was given, those things can be challenged. And yeah, I can understand why, if you start to analyze it a bit, yeah, you're on a do not fly list anymore, right? Because everything, again, back to what I started with, that is not your body, is an extension of your body, could be used as a weapon.
I very good, Darren.
Thank you.
Good, sir. I think one of the things you mentioned is that we train in the dojo with how to defend yourself against a weapon or whatnot, and I think, as you said, the issue is if we have time to think of the situation, it can slow down our response. And one of the things I've always done with my students, and they're really bad at it at first, but the worst they can do is get better. Is as they move up in rank, and I'll even do this with white belts on maybe the 4th or 5th week of their training, where they really can't do much except breathe. And I'm not trying to be too facetious here, but I will start putting them in situations where they have random attacks, random continuous attacks, where they really don't have time to think. Because in a street situation, thinking, is this a moral thing to do? When the attack starts or commences, is going to get you in a lot of trouble and hurt. And my goal is to have them, if they know their techniques reasonably well, is to immediately respond. We call that mushin, respond without thinking. If someone pulls a gun out, you don't have time to think, well, do I do this technique or that technique, or, and you've got 6 or 7 techniques, you need to respond immediately. Whatever you decide, whatever you're going to do, even if it's saying, here's my wallet. You don't have the option of going into a CSET position and saying, give me a minute to contemplate the possibilities. And that's a hard thing to train students to be able to do, not even considering the moral issues. So you are right. There are a lot of other issues involved surrounding defending yourself. It's how far will you go? And I think you're right on task, Darren.
Sensei, may I hop in here just a sec?
Sure.
I want to pose a question to the group, and I'm not going to pretend to have the answer to this, which is one of the reasons I want to pose it as a question. My first email was self-made. It had ATRQ, ask the right question. Let me present the scenario, okay? We're talking about self-defense and weapons, facing the reality of a weapon, whether it's in our back, in our face, whatever, whether it's a knife or a gun. One of the ways we like to train in our dojo, and we'll do it about every 6 to 8 weeks, I'll bring white t-shirts and washable markers.
Yep.
And people don the t-shirts and pair off, and they each have a knife. So it's a knife fight. Or one of them has a marker and the other one does not have a marker. So it's you against a weapon and you don't have a knife to fight back. Okay? The question I pose is, and this is something that came up in my karate training and then later on in jiu-jitsu training, as a defender in self-defense, do you attack the weapon? Do you attack the holder of the weapon? Do you do both? Do you do it in a certain sequence or a certain order, depending on the situation? I was taught early on to attack the weapon. Sometimes you can get so distracted by the weapon and they're moving that thing around such that you can attack the weapon all you want. That weapon keeps moving faster than you can get to it. And then it's slicing and dicing. And your white shirt now has purple all over it, front and back side. And you realize attacking the weapon didn't work. So what do I have to do to distract enough to seize the weapon, or disable enough to seize the weapon? Or do I need to practice attacking the weapon and becoming more effective with that? I'm throwing it out there because you guys have a lot of experience.
Okay.
Is the question clear?
I'll respond to some of that, if I may. I've done that same scenario training in my dojo, and it's awesome training. But I think that one of the things that I wanted to stress to my students is that if you get in a fight with somebody with a knife, no matter how skilled you are, expect to get cut. And just because you get cut doesn't mean you're going to die. You can still fight. But I think that reality of, expect to get cut is something that needs to be stressed in that, because like you said, that knife is moving, and you watch some of these Filipino fighters that practice with knives. Sometimes the chances of you catching that weapon is going to be very, very, very difficult. But as far as attacking the weapon or attacking the person, I don't have the answer to that. I don't.
Yeah.
Would you say it's situational?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, like gun in the back. I'm in a forced situation. I will spin, and I can get a hold of that barrel rather consistently. Not such an issue.
Yeah.
Knife in the back, turn around, grabbing that knife, grabbing the hand. How short is the knife? How short is the blade?
Yeah. And are you grabbing the blade?
Or grabbing the blade? Whole different animal. Yeah. Again, that is very situational. Anybody else got? Thank you, Raymond. Those are great observations. Anybody else?
Yeah, I agree with what Raymond was saying. I also teach the same thing. It's not if you get cut, it's where and how bad. That's your job. You got to control that. But as far as attacking the weapon, I think it's very situational. Or did they pull a weapon just to scare you? If so, you can act scared and comply. Give them your car keys, give them your phone, give them your wallet, whatever, and they're happy. Fine. I don't think it. I don't necessarily. I think the odds are probably in your favor more if the fight comes to you than if you try to go after him. In most cases, he's probably trying to look. A skilled knife fighter will lure you in and just cut you to shreds. We were talking earlier about controlling the weapon versus controlling the arm or the hand or whatever. I think if you take a step back and make it bigger, you have to control the delivery method. Whether that delivery method is the barrel of the gun, the hand holding the knife, the arm of the knife. But the biggest weapon that you're fighting is the opponent's brain. If you can kind of control where that weapon is pointed or where it's moving, and then disrupt their OODA loop, right? Get them out of what their thought process was and give them something else to think about. With some strong striking to vital targets in the head, on the neck, or wherever you have to hit them, and then all of a sudden things aren't going the way they planned, and they might even forget they have the weapon in their hand. They're bleeding, they're trying to breathe, or they can't see, or whatever the case might be. Yeah. Then you've got a better chance.
When it's an individual against a knife, we teach being able to turn and run faster than the knife wielder.
There you go.
We also
don't fight if you don't have to.
Right. With knife on knife, we make it really clear that it's not something you want to be involved in, and that likely one's going to go to the hospital and the other's going to go to the morgue. Or you both go to the morgue. It's grim. Don't go there if you don't have to.
Yeah. One of the best.
One of Mr. Miyagi's old sayings from the Karate Kid movies, right? Best defense, don't be there.
Don't be there.
Right. The one of the things that Seki taught on rare occasion, he'd explain something. His attitude was, whenever a student asked him a question, was either he'd ignore him or just simply say, "Watch me." One of the things he did mention is that if you have a knife threat or attack, you do not want to be facing your attacker full frontal. You want to have one of your sides facing him, because what happens is, if he does try to do a slice and dice, less of your body is in the way, number one. And number two, if you do get cut, it's preferable to get cut on the outer side of your arm than the inner side, which is where the arteries are. And that's easier said than done in a real sense. The other factor that Dave mentioned was what you're trying to do, if you're defending yourself and you distract the person, you're creating what's called a reaction gap. And that is, I learned about that in driver training in high school. If you see something happening in your car and you need to stop real fast, it's going to take you about 1.2 to 1.7 seconds to have your brain see it, have your brain tell your foot to hit the brake. And the same thing applies in a street situation. If you do something to distract the person, and as Dave said, it takes their mind off of what they were planning to do. And I'm sure we've all had this happen to us in different situations, is you've got about 1.5 seconds to do something before they get their act together. And you know, as jiu-jitsu practitioners, 1.5 seconds is a lot of time if you know, if you're skilled at what you're doing. You know, you can throw a person in under 2 seconds. You know it. And I've had students that have been in street situations. They haven't had time to think. They've just responded, and they said it was over so fast. I don't even know what I did. And I mean, that's one of the advantages for putting your students into random situation training. They do get better at it, and they stop thinking about what they have. Excuse me. They stop thinking about what they have to do. They just do it, and you face the moral consequences afterwards. But if the alternative is getting beat up or breaking another person's wrist or having them get a concussion, and they attacked you, and you know, hopefully there are witnesses, you can morally justify what you did. You may not feel good about it. And I know most of my students that have been in street situations were, as I think I said last time, they were surprised that they actually caused a serious injury to their attacker. And they were surprised that the technique worked. Well, do it this way. This is peace. This means you have a joint for those of you who grew up in the 60s.
Never knew that.
I had trouble explaining that to my high school students who were using this as a peace symbol. No.
That's funny. Cynthia, one day it comes to mind, perhaps worth sharing. When I was working toward a black belt in jiu-jitsu, after my karate black belt, there were 6 other people that we were working together as a consortium. 6 of us were black belts. One of them was a brown belt who might as well have been a black belt. And it was great because we had a lot of ukis. We always had ukis. Working with a variety of people worked out well. One of them was a cop on the beat. He happened to be someone who presented at our last seminar on October 27th. His name's John Touchton. And he liked to be on the beat. Took a lot of heat for not writing more traffic tickets, but he wanted to be out of his car on the street. He was chasing a guy one time, several blocks. The guy turned around and near point blank range put a gun right at John's chest. Well, John's facing this gun, sees it, and immediately blades. And when he does, the bullet fires and cuts across his chest. He took off his shirt and showed us the scar from where the bullet passed through his pectoral muscles. And he was teaching us the value of not being there. He was there. When he bladed, he was less there. And he saved his own life by simply, in a full run, just turning his body sideways. That was a profound lesson for me, and something I'm glad he shared. And it's situational, and you know, here he didn't concern himself with attacking the weapon or the sequence or whatever. The weapon was there, it was presented, He didn't see it coming. And once he saw the weapon, he took defensive action by moving his own body.
Yeah. Your body is the hardest thing to get out of the way of a target unless you, if you just let your feet do their job, we call it tabaki, one of the two.
Yeah.
If you let your feet do the job, you can get your body from frontal to left or right, whatever you want. But it you have to have a sensei who knows that so they can teach it, the concept, and students have to practice it because it has to be an automatic reaction. I'm sure that, what was his name?
John Touchton, I don't know. He didn't say he trained or didn't train to do that.
Yeah.
What brought it to mind when you said present your side and get cut on the outside of the arm instead of the inside. What he did by blading his body, by turning to the side, is he made less of a target of himself. If he had kept running and hadn't turned, the bullet would have gone through his chest.
Right.
It may not have killed him. It may have just punctured a lung. It may have gone through his heart and killed him instantly. There's no way of knowing. He didn't stick around to find out. He saw it. He spun sideways. By the way, he ended up apprehending the guy.
But see, that's what's called an automatic reaction.
Yes. Okay.
And that's the key to your survival in a street situation. And you have to be able to react automatically because you're in a street situation. Your brain is the slowest thing going for you. You hate to say that to people, but you can either think about paying your taxes or you can just pay your taxes. For lack of a poor analogy that many of us are facing in the next month or so. But it is a challenge, and it's hard to train students for this, but I think regardless of martial art, and I think this is where some martial arts fall apart, is you've got to be able to train your students for street situations.
Yeah. Will mentioned the OODA loop earlier, and what John did successfully on that day was not go into the OODA loop. He observed and he acted. He left out the orient and decide.
Yeah.
And so again, one of the beautiful things about what students can achieve in a dojo in a realistic training setting, even though it's a sterile environment and it's a relatively safe environment, is training so that you realize that you're not going to go into that chemical soup that your brain can create in the in the orient and decide.
Yeah.
And
you could argue he did go through it, but he went through it quick.
What's that now?
You could argue that he still went through that loop, but it was fast. He saw that gun and he decided quickly, I got to get out of the way.
It is possible. His orient decide was instantaneous if he did it at all. Well, motion is when I've had somebody who wants a demonstration of jujitsu, my favorite thing to do is say, come at me. I don't know if they're going to kick, throw, body slam, if they're going to try to trip me, if they're going to, one of the more profound experiences when somebody just jumped at me and put me in a front bear hug. It was like, I immediately did a wheel throw. And I left out the groin strike. I did a wheel throw, put him on the ground. And he says, ouch, that hurt. And I said, the pain will go away in about 30 seconds and you're not hurt. But I said, life and death, my knee would be crushing your sternum right now. And poor guy, his office staff was watching when that happened. But the point being that I had a first class real world experience of Mushin. Not in Randori in a dojo, but in a setting where somebody wanted a demonstration. And I was taken and surprised by how my body did what it did without me thinking. I was surprised that it was instant. I just thought that I would have that orient decide a little bit, but I'd done so many wheel throws and training and taught it so many times. I didn't have to think, oh gosh, I'm in a bear hug. What do I do?
I think the key here to effective self-defense is that whatever you do, it must be automatic, because you've got to cut that time delay or reaction time delay down as much as you can, and you can only do that through repeated practice. By the way, Yogi, we don't have any video or audio for you, just so you know. So that's to me, that's the key to survival. You what John, what John did was, I think, was it John? Dave, what was his first name?
You talking about John Touchton?
Yeah. What he did was just simply an automatic reaction. And that's what effective self-defense is, because it's not a, we can train in the dojo under ideal situations, and we can learn how to do techniques perfectly, and we can get past belt tests, yada, yada, yada. But I've seen some, I've said before, I've seen some black belts do beautiful ju-jitsu kata routines, but they can't fight their way out of a wet paper bag. And, it comes down to what do you train for? And that's the key. I mean, if you're, and you can apply that to anything in life. Okay, I'd like to move on here, because it's a somewhat related topic, and that is using your physical environment. And it's a matter of being, I don't know what can't think of the term now. If you're aware of your surroundings, it's called your
situational awareness.
What was it?
Situational awareness.
Zanshin?
Okay. Let me try this again. Dave, what did you say?
Zanshin?
Janshin?
Zanshin.
Zanshin, yes, that's part of it. Who else had an answer here?
I said situational awareness.
Situational awareness, yes. That's critical, because you may not actually have to physically encounter this person. Years ago, I had I didn't have a student. I was a department chair, and so I had a walkie-talkie at this high school I was at, and there was this kid. He walked into the men's faculty restroom, and I was outside, and I had problems with him before, and I had already called for security, and he wanted to, I didn't want to have a physical encounter with him. He was bigger than I was, and I'm not entirely stupid. And he wanted to come out, and fortunately, I knew how to keep the door from opening. You can use your shoe. I wouldn't wear an athletic shoe, like a Keds or something like that. But if you have a shoe with a good front on it, you can stop a person from opening a door simply by wedging the front of your shoe against the side of the door, the front side of the door. And he got it open maybe 4 inches, at which point he started swearing at me and threatening at me. And eventually security took him away. But if you're aware of what's around you and what can be used, you don't necessarily have to have an actual physical action against this student or person. And that's a desirable outcome. If you can get something in the way of them. I have this, I'm not going to open it right now. I have this, I found this actually on Amazon. It's a coiled up, very thin steel, and it's got a pin in it. And you can find this on Amazon, And what happens is I can hold this in my hand, assuming if I take the pin out, I've got this thumb thing here, and I push this, and this will shoot out about 2 to 3 feet on each side. It really will intimidate them. I would not, as far as strength is concerned, it doesn't have much strength. But I just bought it because I thought, this is cool. This could really intimidate someone for a moment. And they don't know what the construction is. And if all of a sudden you push this, and now you've got essentially a handbow or Joe length device in your hand, they're going to step back. Okay. Or maybe they'll decide not to do that. I don't know why I still have it. I bought this about 5 years ago. It just looked like a fun thing to have. It's hard to collapse back down. I think it was only like $5 or $6. But there are things you can carry on you. But the key is anything you have on you, if you're planning to use, has to be in your hand. And how many of you have had students who say, I can use pepper spray? How many of you have trained with pepper spray?
Pepper spray can be used against you.
Have it use it? Yeah, you need to. Yeah, once was enough for me. But it has to be in your hand. For pepper spray, the safety has to be turned off. You have to know how to use it. And if you're using a spray instead of a stream, you want to be upwind of it. Because pepper spray will come back towards you. With stream, it'll go where it's supposed to go. But, it's whatever you have. Before they had pepper spray, they had what were called rape whistles. And they even have now, press the button and it puts out a loud screeching sound that can be heard 50 miles away by your chihuahua, who'll start barking. But if it's not in your hand and you don't have your thumb on the button, it's useless. It's like having a gun but no bullets in it. Well,
Yeah.
you could use it to hit someone with, but beyond that, it's fairly useless. So, do you work with your students in terms of being aware of things in their physical environment?
One of the things that's worth discussing is people can come across as kind and thoughtful and considerate and then turn on a dime. It's how Ted Bundy operated. In my own experience, what comes to mind is priest at one of the outstanding priests at our church was going to be moving to a church some distance away. And his last Sunday, in the Mass, he stood at the back of the church and we gave him hugs. I knew this guy was a judo black belt. We talked self-defense. But what I did was I gave him, just like my bride did, my family, I gave him a full hug. He turned his hip and my feet were off the ground in an instant. And I go, uh-oh. He had me in half of an ogoshi just instantaneously. So
Did he know your background?
Oh yeah, and he just couldn't resist. Okay, that was his goodbye present to me. And he had a great sense of humor. But once my feet were off the ground, I was totally at his mercy. Forget Tai Sabaki, forget any kind of readiness. It's an unforgettable moment. I can put it back in my head just anytime I want, and I don't like that feeling. But the point I'm making is that we can be ready. Any one of us can be blindsided at any time. So you might not even see it coming. But the other is someone who is presenting themselves one way and turns in an instant, and has nefarious intent. And preparing for that or being ready for that is another animal.
Yeah, and part of it is how we respond to people is based on our training. A couple of weeks ago, I was shaking someone's hand, and I won't, if I'm shaking their hand, I don't do this and shake their hand. I have one or two fingers straight on their, extending towards there's a pressure point here
Mhm.
on the inside. I forget what the term is, or even the number or the name of the pressure point. But I just do that out of habit because I know if I get someone who's cousin Bubba and they're really going to try and intimidate me with a really strong grip, I can just press down on that point. It won't hurt them, but it basically negates their grip. And I just do that out of habit. And it's the person actually asked me, why did you do that? Because they were able to sense I wasn't giving them a normal handshake grip. And I explained it to them. They said, oh, okay. So, some things we do just out of habit, or if my daughter used to do it a lot more. I used to refer to her as from the Pink Panther series, not Peter Sellers, but the houseboy Kato, and my daughter Kimberly, who's now 39, she'll still do it on rare occasion. Used to be Kato to me. I mean, she went up as far as green belt officially, but she'd come up to me and try to do techniques on me. Or if I was in a particular, she'd go for a nerve attack. Vicious little kid. No. But, I have no worries about her ability to take care of herself. She also stands 5'10", which is intimidating to a lot of people anyway. But the point is, we do things out of habit, and sometimes if and I know the experience you've been through, Dave. I've been through too. You run into someone who's a martial artist, either any of the martial, and they know you have a background. They'll start to do something. They'll try to do something just to see how you'll react.
Mhm.
And that's how you say that's one of the, to me, that's one of the neat things about being in the martial arts. There's a certain camaraderie that's unique, and that person knows I'm not actually going to do the technique to them, and they know I'm not going to do the, there's a, how do you say, there's an understanding right beforehand that there's not going to be any follow through here. But it's to me, that's part of the enjoyment of the art.
Who can get the jump on the other?
Who can get the jump on the other? And that comes down to, as I said before, you training, for automatic reaction. And also, as you and Darren have said, being able to control what you do. If had he thrown you, would you have done a reverse on him?
I was too busy laughing. I was freaked out and laughing, but could I have done a reverse? Yeah, would I? Not in that situation, I don't think. I think I would have been focusing on slapping out on the tile floor.
Okay, and the situation is important too, because you don't expect to be attacked by the priest in a church.
Yeah,
and that's where Raymond said situational awareness is so important, because regardless of your environment, you have to be aware of where you are and what's around you. Just and it may it doesn't mean you have to be paranoid and constantly looking around you, because that makes you on the street. If you're constantly looking around you, that's a good indication that you make a good target. But if you take, a casual view, you can probably take in, and you know what you're looking for. You can probably just do a casual look around every once in a while, and you're safe because you know what's going on around you. And
Since I didn't think about it till this moment when you asked the question, but if I had done a reversal where you grab the shoulder and then throw him, his vestments would have protected him. I'd have gotten a fistful of vestments. It wouldn't have been like grabbing a shirt or a jacket.
that's called a good investment.
You couldn't resist.
Okay,
You were talking about situational awareness and looking around. You know, we do talk about that a lot in our classes. And you know, everybody uses the term situational awareness, but not a lot of, you know, untrained people know really what that means. But like you're talking about, you know, being aware of what's around, like walking into a room or a place of business or a restaurant or whatever, just take a look around. Where are the exits? How do I get out of here if I need to?
right.
Walking in a
Where
parking
are
lot.
my points of cover and concealment? What's the difference between cover and concealment? And kind of talk through that with them. You know, I heard something years ago that I always remember, and I talk about, you know, you need to think about what would happen if, and kind of play that through in your mind and kind of visualize that. What would I do if, and play it so that if it does happen, you can respond quickly. You know, it was a saying I heard. The saying I was talking about was, you know, your body can't go where your mind hasn't been, right? You need to visualize these things, think about these things. Then when it's time to act, it's that much easier to act.
Right.
I mean, drill down to the point where you go into a restaurant, the server asks you, or the host asks you, do you want a table or a booth? Always say table. You know, an active shooter or a fire, something breaks out, it's a lot easier to get up from a table and run than to try to scoot out from behind a booth.
Yeah. I forgot what I was going to say. Must have been unimportant. Anyway, okay.
But that goes to some of the ramifications that like Darren was talking about earlier. Like, you know, all of these things, you have these moral decisions and there's legal ramifications. I mean, you got criminal, you got civil, you've got physical injury, but you also have mental health issues. And students need to make that decision. What am I comfortable doing in a self-defense situation? And make that decision and think it through on the mat. You know, don't wait till it happens and you're in that situation. You're trying to, oh, I don't know, can I gouge this guy in the eye? Can I pull a trigger on somebody? You know, don't wait till the first time you think about that is in the moment when you have to make that decision.
Right.
Well, something related to what you're talking about that is important, and I share with students. When you're in a parking lot and you go back to your car and you close that door, if you sit there and adjust your wallet or adjust things, you are a sitting duck, particularly after dark, depending, especially what part of the parking lot you're in. Somebody else can open the door and you're sitting there holding whatever, and you're better off understanding that when you are in a situation like that, get in your car, lock the door, crank it up, and go. And you can adjust your wallet and anything else you want to adjust in your own garage after the door's shut, or in your own driveway if you don't have a garage, much more safely than you can in a supermarket or a mall parking lot.
Okay, well, part of that is I'm jotting some notes down here.
Sensei, I know you're getting closer to the conclusion of today's session, but if you get a chance before logging off today, taking a look at some of the chat that Jason has left, he's made some very good points in there. Looks like he's a law enforcement official, and concur with some of the comments that Will was saying just now and some of the ones that Dave had mentioned as well. So
right, and Jason and Yogi, I hope whatever technical issues you're both having, I've had PCs that I hate too. I hope you get what the technical issues resolved. It may, because Yogi, we got you. You've got a
There I am.
You must be on a smartphone that's being.
You got to be smarter than the phone, though. That's the trick. and I'm not so much. So it's always taken a little bit for me to get used to anything when it comes to technology.
Okay. Glad to have you on screen finally.
Thank you.
But yeah, I have my thought pattern went down the tubes. Glad to have you with us. And
Thank you. And just to add something when it comes to the situational awareness thing, I'm also a law enforcement officer, and I've been one in a lot of different states and a lot of different places. And to be able to game what you're going to do, like as you're driving down the street, or if you're walking into a restaurant, or if you're doing anything, and to be able to just play through what if something goes bad. I think that's something that a lot of people take for granted, because if you could just play that through in your head and do a lot of mental repetitions, I think that saves people's lives. I know it saved mine multiple times. Just walking to a call, going to a call, saying, okay, if something does go bad here, what am I willing to do? What am I going to do? And then just to run through that as many times as you can. And then it's almost like you're doing the reps before you get there. So I think that's very vital when it comes to any type of physical, or, if God forbid you got to shoot somebody, but any type of situation like that, I think it's quite necessary to be able to play the end result in your head over and over and over again until it's second nature.
Yeah, it's very valid, because if you can prep yourself for something, you're better able to handle the situation if things go south, for lack of a better phrase. And I know particularly the junior high was that, which was we had a big gang problem. We had adults coming on campus, all this other stuff that should not be happening in any school environment. Of course, this is back in the 60s and 70s. You kind of have to be, as you're approaching a situation, I said, you need to take in all the visual information you can get and whatever feedback you can get, so that when you're there, you have some sort of action plan, because it makes you more self-confident. If you're more self-confident, you have a better chance of being successful, because sometimes the other person realizes that you know what you're doing. Whether or not you do is irrelevant, but as long as you can create that illusion, and this applies to a lot of other things in life. I used to tell my kids in junior high and when I taught high school, if there's, officially every kid's supposed to have a pass and all this other stuff. But if you look like you know where you're going, no one's going to bother you. Whereas if you kind of look around and you're kind of wandering around, people are going to stop you and ask you, where should you be, or what should you be doing? It's you to an extent, if you're going to confront someone, need to look like you need to have some people call it an air of authority, but you need to appear and sound like you know what you're doing.
Yeah, you need to project that confidence.
Yeah, it's I was talking to the highway patrolman years and years ago. I was driving to school on the freeway and I got pulled over for speeding. And he asked me, what do you do? I said, I'm a teacher at OV. And, so he said, well, I'm not going to give you a ticket, just a warning. He says, but, and we started talking. He says, if I came up to you and said in a high voice, I pulled you over because, you would probably just take off. He says, so I have to have an authoritative voice. I need to sound like I know what I'm doing and have the ability and power to do it. And many times, and you don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to be shouting. He said, that's why I use a low voice. It makes me sound calm. Yes, I am apprehensive when I stop a vehicle because you don't know what's going to happen. He says, but and that was a great lesson for me, which I wasn't expecting to get. So that's part of your success. If you could, you can stop situationally, you can stop some things simply by how you behave and what you do.
We call it command presence.
Command presence, right? And it's so important.
Sometimes people will use humor to diffuse the situation. In Massachusetts,
Humor works too good too.
Was speeding. Policeman pulled him over. There were two girls in the car, and he said, "Why were you going so fast?" And the passenger said, "We're on the way to the policeman's ball." And he said, "Young lady, in Massachusetts, policemen don't have balls." And then the laughter just erupted, and it was no way to write a ticket after that.
It's kind of like what was his name? There was a comedian, Hispanic comedian, who's overweight. He's extremely. I can't think of his name right now. He had a special on TV a few weeks ago. Great comedian, and he said one of his best routines was he was driving home and he had a box of what's the donut brand with the supposedly really good
Krispy Kreme.
What?
Krispy Kreme.
And I don't know the comedian's name. And he said, I was contemplating them and dreaming about eating them, and I got pulled over. and the officer gets to the window and he says, I took this whole box of Krispy Kremes and said, would you like them? He didn't get a ticket. So it's the command authority. It's how you present yourself. Just one short story. Years ago, when I was again at the junior high, I had a great principal, but for a while I was a union rep, and I would sit at the opposite end of the long table when we had our staff meetings, because I knew it. He liked everybody looking at him all the time, and I knew that by sitting at the opposite end of the table, everyone would have to turn and look at me as a union rep, and I knew what I was doing. And he made some really long argument for something. And I said, Mr. Miles, I really appreciate your comments, although they were insagrievous. 2 days later, I get called into his office. He finally figured out what insagrievous meant. And I knew his personality. He just he chewed me out for about 10 minutes. The big Irish guy. I knew it was just part of his routine. And then he just said, next time use English. So maybe part of this is you have to, if you have control of the situation, you need to use it to your advantage. I've been in situations, and I don't know if Yogi has been in this, where I've confronted gang members, and one of them gets behind me and starts making remarks. I usually say to the person in charge, get your chihuahua off my back. And the guy knows what I mean, because what chihuahuas do is get behind you and chew at your heels, bite at your heel. So sometimes if you're familiar with, you're familiar with your enemy, or your enemy, it can give you some advantage where you can, lower the level of stress or tension. And yet humor is a good way to do it, because if you can get everybody to laugh, you have something in common.
What I found is that I think that they have a say, and the police are the closest things to criminals that the public has ever seen. And I think mentality-wise, you have to be in order to survive. And I think Jason made a good point. When it comes down to situational or command presence, as we said, I think when you look another person in the eyes and you understand what you're capable of, and I think that confidence is only earned. You can't fake it. But when you understand what you're capable of, I think subconsciously, when you look another human being in the eyes and that, they don't exactly understand what they're feeling, but they know at least that this isn't going to be easy.
Right.
And I think that type of stuff, that skill is command presence in an essence, in my opinion. But I think the knowledge that you've been through enough to be able to be tested and consider yourself tested, that is something that subconsciously another person will recognize upon your approach.
Yes. And one other thing I found that worked tremendously well, like you said, eye contact is so important. Because I learned from my gangbanger kid, I learned his eye language. And if you know the other side's eye language, you know what they're thinking. And you know what I'm talking about. That's so critical. And I had a bad habit of looking through people's eyes. And the person I was talking would at some point, they'd realize it fairly early, and they'd turn and look behind them, and they'd ask me, what's going on? Because they thought I was looking at something behind them. And that puts doubt in their mind. So, I'm not, you're not, there are situations where I am, yes, intentionally trying to intimidate this person, but, and most people don't like you to look through their eyes.
Right.
If you can have eye-to-eye contact, that's bad enough.
Right.
But when you
I also think too that when you walk into somebody and you're looking at them in the face, because of if you trained and you know what it feels, when you know what it looks like when somebody's posturing in order to attack, right? If you do that and you understand that and you're not automatically afraid of it because you know what's about to happen and you're very comfortable in your own skills, what I find is I call them out and be like, look, if you go this route, it's going to be bad for you.
Yeah.
Think about another way to do this because this is not going to end good for you. And it's almost like you're reading their mind and nobody understands how to take that. So it at least gives you a couple of seconds to gauge the situation to whether you can either de-escalate or you can then gain the advantage of the attack because they're off center.
And you're giving them an option to de-escalate.
Absolutely.
Yes. I mean, I've done that so many times. I'll say simply, you have two choices. You can either leave campus or you will be detained. You will be detained and the LAPD will come pick you up. Now, this usually by that time, this is before school police in LA. At least we didn't have school police in our school. Because we were out on the outer borders of the school district. But we had a security team that was a karate black belt, a bouncer, 2 or 3 of the boys' PE teachers that were on the well-built side. And so by the time I was through making my conversation, there might be 1, 2, or 3 of those people within distance 8, 10, 20 feet already. So usually they made the wise decision to leave the campus. I don't want to say very few dumb people are stupid. Yeah. And if you don't know the difference, did anyone not know the difference between dumb and stupid? I learned this from my 7th grade PE teacher in the mid-50s. His name was Coach Raines. He stood like 6'15", and we were little 7th grade idiots. And he'd say, "There's a difference between dumb and stupid. Dumb people don't know any better. Stupid people know better, but do it anyway." He says, "I can put up with you if you're dumb, but don't go stupid on me." And that's stuck with me. It's, and you say that to people, and it gives them it gives them a moment to step back and, well, I can be dumb, but I'm not going to be stupid. So, and it works. I've used it, and it works. But anyway, okay. We've approached where we've gone over a couple minutes, and I'm still trying to get through this post-cold, whatever it is, and the doctor doesn't know, but he gave me a bunch of meds. I've had all my shots. So we're going to stop at this point unless someone, yeah, and the doctors don't know what bug it is because they say it's really common. Flu people have ended up with this, cold people. We don't know what it is. Just whatever they get just lingers on and on. So don't get it. I've been dealing with this for like 3 weeks now. It's just like a really low level cold, but it gets in your lungs, throat. It's just an annoyance, like a dumb person who's gone stupid. Anyway, so well, Raymond, thank you for joining us first time. Jason,
Thank you for having me here.
Yogi, hopefully
Thank you.
get on right at the outset. And starting next month, I'm going to cut this down for right now. I'm going to cut this down to one session every month, the first Saturday of each month. And then because we're really running out of topics now, if we start getting a bunch of topics again, I've written down a couple from today's discussion, but I don't know if they're repeats of previous discussions. But Yogi and Jason, if you have nothing else to do with your life for 3 or 4 days, you can go onto YouTube and go through all the past workshops or conferences.
I'm a cop. I always have time.
My best friend used to work midnights in Baltimore City, and that was his favorite time to get caught up on all the TV shows or whatever.
I've watched the internet at this point.
Anyway, take care of yourselves. We'll see you April. I think it's April 4th or 5th.
We're going to skip March.
Oh, March. Yeah, March. We have March 1st. I'm sorry. It'll be March 1st. And see you then. And hopefully some of you guys will submit some really good topics, and I'll have to go back to two times a month. Okay. Which is really what I'd prefer. Anyway, that's about it. Take care of yourselves. If you're back east or in the Midwest, I wish you the best. Don't let the weather get you down. And we like I said, we just got through our massive rainstorm of the year, maybe 2 inches, which is nothing in most of the rest of the country.
Well, it's good to see you again. And Raymond, Yogi, and Jason, thanks for being here. Hope you come back.
I'll see you next time for sure.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good to see you, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good seeing you again, Will.
Good to see you too.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
See ya.